Hi everybody, as you can see I'm up here again at Scott's View, which is where some of the ashes of the dude are residing. A lot of you know I'm a big fan of David Rudolf, and obviously David recently wrote the book American Injustice, and of course a lot of you will know David Rudolf, famous for The Staircase. They've done a new series about the staircase, which in parts are not very accurate, not very good. Even David Rudolf himself has been somewhat critical of the way that the original staircase has been altered. I mean, there was no need to do, you know, this sort of Hollywood type thing, production of it. Anyway, I've had the pleasure of seeing David Rudolf both in Amsterdam, along with Jerry Buting, and also in both Sydney and Melbourne, along with obviously Steve Drizzen and Laura Nyrider. And very good he is, excellent at doing his presentations, and even doing PowerPoint presentations along the way. But as was Jerry, the last presentation I went to was seeing Jerry in Edinburgh. I'm actually looking forward to going back up to Edinburgh at the end of the month and meeting up with Diane, to retrieve the banner, the famous banner, but also she pointed out that there's a show up in Edinburgh called Making a Murderer the Musical. So I'm going to go along to it and see what that's all about. Should be good. While we wait for Kathleen Zellner to file her latest motion, it's always interesting to look at cases that parallel, amazingly, the parallels between this case that I don't know, that Stephen, that David Rudolf was involved in, and is mentioned in the book. And we'll look at a couple of paragraphs in the book and a recent news article. David actually put this link to this news article in LinkedIn. I then went to bring it up, and it wasn't available. So sometimes that happens, and certain articles you can't get in the UK, but I managed to get hold of this one. So let's share screen and let's have a look at this. Excuse me. Now, obviously, Ray Finch hasn't had a Netflix documentary about him, but he's actually spent 43 years wrongfully convicted. And after 43 years, the state must pay $7.5 million for wrongful conviction to a North Carolina man. And here we see Ray Finch being escorted in a wheelchair out of prison. Charles Ray Finch, not Ray Charles, but Charles Ray Finch, is wheeled out of the Green Correctional Institution Thursday, May 23rd, 2019, in Murray, North Carolina. Finch served more than 40 years in prison for a shopkeeper's slaying in a failed robbery attempt. The North Carolina State Bureau of Investigation and its insurers will pay $7.5 million to the estate. Unfortunately, Ray's no longer with us. To the estate of a North Carolina man who was wrongfully convicted of a 1976 murder. Charles Ray Finch died in January at 83. He was freed from a North Carolina prison 3 years ago after a federal judge overturned his murder conviction, for which he spent 34 years in prison. The parties reached a settlement agreement that was finalized Tuesday, the Wilson Times reported. Wilson is Wilson County. In December 2019, Finch filed a federal lawsuit against Wilson County, its current sheriff, 2 former deputies, and 2 NCSBI, North Carolina Special Bureau of Investigation employees. The News and Observer reported at the time. The lawsuit accused the respective agencies of corruption, specifically that the former deputies framed Finch for murder, an SBI agent covered for the sheriff's office, and an SBI general counsel later hid evidence that would have cleared Finch. As I say, you can't make this stuff up. The parallels are amazing. The original civil complaint contended Finch's wrongful imprisonment was the result of a pattern of rampant corruption in the Wilson County Sheriff's Office at the time of his arrest and conviction. The lawsuit claimed that Sheriff's Office not only framed Finch for the murder, but that several other officials had a hand in covering up evidence that could have freed him decades prior to his release. The Special Bureau of Investigation, the SBI will now pay Finch's estate $1.5 million, while the state's insurance carriers will pay the remaining $6 million. This is the best bit. There are 7.5 million reasons why we think they've admitted they did wrong to Ray Finch, said attorney David Rudolf, who represented Finch. I think of a lot of it had to do with the pattern and practice we were able to establish with the Special Bureau of Investigation. In 1976, Finch was convicted of fatally shooting a gas station owner in a botched robbery. 3 years later, then Sheriff W. Robin Pridgeon was convicted of federal racketeering charges, having looked the other way in a brothel scheme in exchange for bribes. The lawsuit filed by Finch, I mean, again, you know, we've heard enough from Dave Bogotka to know exactly the sort of racketeering that goes on in Manitowoc. You know, we're not surprised it goes on in other places. The lawsuit filed by Finch cited the federal investigation. Hold on a second, I'm going to pause this because she is typical. As soon as I sit down to start recording. Right. As soon as I sit down to start recording the video and you kick off. No, it ain't happening. It ain't happening. I've just sat down to start recording and she kicks off. She brings a fucking ball to me. You're going to get bloody put in the back of the car or taken out with mum. That's a better idea.
How long have you
How
got?
long will you be? I'm going to be about 10 minutes. Okay, so it's incredible. As soon as I sit down to start recording a video, she kicks off. She brings the ball to me. Have to throw it. No, it ain't happening this time. Where did we get to? Yeah, we were talking about, as I say, Dave Bogotka, who's told us many a times about the corruption in Manitowoc. And as I say, are we surprised that it happens elsewhere? Of course we're not. Unhappy about it, yeah, but not surprised. Let's just do that sentence one more. In 1976, Finch was convicted of fatally shooting a gas station owner in a botched robbery. The only difference between this case and Stephen Avery's is that the then sheriff, W. Robin Pridgeon, was convicted of federal racketeering charges. Tom Kosurik managed to do a little bit better and managed to avoid that ignominy, having looked the other way in a brothel scheme in exchange for bribes. The lawsuit filed by Finch cited the federal investigation that found Pridgeon's office would identify businesses with large amounts of cash on hand and then organize robberies with the cash split between the parties. And that's what happened at the gas station when the robbery went wrong, the lawsuit alleges. Finch was blamed because of bad blood between him and one of the deputies, it says. Again, amazing, isn't it? You know, the old Jody Morris situation. Shortly after, the then sheriff, was convicted, Finch tried to have his sentence vacated, but he was thwarted by the state agency's general counsel, who refused to release agency files for years, the lawsuit alleged. Finch was freed in 2019 after a 15-year investigation by Duke University's Wrongful Conviction Clinic. In January 2019, the US Fourth Circuit of Appeals ruled in Finch's favor, declaring him actually innocent of the crime. In a unanimous decision, the three-judge panel, so no en-banc hearing, said three highly suggestive police lineups violated Finch's constitutional rights and that no reasonable juror would have convicted Finch based on the totality of both old and new evidence. Again, if you read the book American Injustice, you'll understand about the identity lineup. But again, another parallel. Penny Bernstein, and Stephen Avery is the only one that she's already seen a picture of. On May 23rd, 2019, a federal judge overturned Finch's 1976 conviction, and he was subsequently freed. North Carolina Governor Ray Cooper granted him a pardon of innocence in June 2021. Okay, let's have a look. I'm just going to very quickly have a look at one other thing I wanted to show you. Screen. Yeah, there we go. I had got it right after. I shall be released. This is chapter 29, as I say, from this great book by David Rudolf. I see my light come shining from the west into the east. Any day now, I shall be released. Bob Dylan, 1967. I don't remember 67 very well. I was only 2 years old. Now that we've seen how police and prosecutor error and misconduct can result in wrongful convictions, let's revisit the case of Ray Finch, who was accused of killing Shadow Holloman in 1976. Ray was tried and convicted of murder and sentenced to death during the high point of lawlessness and corruption in Wilson County, North Carolina, at a time when the sheriff's department had no regard and no respect for the rule of law, at a time when the sheriff's department was operated as a wide-ranging racketeering enterprise, and persons with interests in local gambling, prostitution, and narcotics trade paid the sheriff for protection and thrive without fear of prosecution. Abuses of power by police and prosecutors, like those described in this book, were commonplace and done with reckless impunity. We know all this because of a 2-year investigation by the FBI that resulted in the trial and conviction of the elected sheriff on corruption charges. Ray Finch claimed all along that his arrest was related to the corruption and that he was prosecuted while the real killer was protected in order to safeguard the all-encompassing lawlessness in the county that was padding so many wallets. This wasn't just a bare allegation with no substance. Ray backed it up with corroborative details and the names of dozens of witnesses who Ray believed would confirm his theory. You get this again, dozens of witnesses. What happened in Steve's case? Dozens of witnesses in the Penny Bernstein. When the new sheriff asked the FBI to investigate Ray's claims, only 3 months after the federal corruption trials in Wilson County had concluded, it seemed all that happened was an official whitewash. An official whitewash, like the one by Peg Leixelager. The investigating agent, Special Agent Alan McMahon, did not interview any of the witnesses identified by Ray, and likewise did not interview the former sheriff or his chief deputy, the very men Ray claimed were responsible for his arrest, or Lester Floyd Jones, one of the eyewitnesses in the case. Instead, Agent McMahon concluded summarily and inexplicably that Ray could not substantiate his allegations of corruption, despite the conviction of the former sheriff on corruption charges. and he closed his file on the matter, leaving Ray incarcerated with diminishing prospects for release. Ray was not provided with a copy of Agent McMahon's report and would not learn of its contents for decades to come. Years and years passed with no hope for Ray. He was shuttled from one prison to another as the events of that February in 1976 slipped into the past. Then, in 2001, Ray sent a desperate letter to the Duke Law Innocence Project, a student-led volunteer organization devoted to identifying wrongful convictions and investigating claims of innocence. The Duke Law Innocence Project was brand new when Ray made contact, and his case was the very first case undertaken by the organization. Led by Professors Jim Coleman and Teresa Newman, students and attorneys at Duke Law School took on Ray's case and began their own investigation. The Duke Law Wrongful Convictions Clinic would soon also join the fight on Ray's behalf. They would leave no stone unturned. I say it's really interesting to look at the parallels, isn't it? You know, the sort of shenanigans going on both in Wilson County and Manitowoc County with Ray Finch, Stephen Avery. And just the fact that they're able to do it most of the time, as the article said, without any impunity. They are the law, and therefore they can do what they like. As I say, we hope that Kathleen Zellner will soon be filing her latest motion with new evidence. We certainly look forward to that. I like the fact that things have been kept quiet with this new evidence, because it seems in the past as if she's given people chance to try and come up with bizarre excuses. No slips of what's going on this time. Anyway, hopefully we'll catch you again soon, and I will endeavour to leave the link to that actual article in the description below, and I'm sure you'll, depending on where you live, you will be able to find other articles, maybe in more detail, in other countries. Okay, catch you all again soon. Thanks for tuning in. Bye for now.